Ben Harper breathed in the sharp, pine-scented air, the cold stinging his nostrils in the most invigorating way possible. Below him, the vast expanse of the Frostpine ski resort sprawled across the mountain's sculpted curves, a tapestry of pristine white under the crisp, azure dome of the winter sky. His chalet, the Snow Hare, perched on a lesser-visited ridge, offered this breathtaking panorama every morning, a private reward for choosing solitude over the bustling main lodge. This trip was his sanctuary. 3 weeks carved out from the relentless grind of city life, spreadsheets replaced by powder, conference calls by the rhythmic shush of skis carving arcs on corduroy snow. He'd arrived a week ago, settling into the cozy, wood-paneled chalet with its crackling stone fireplace, its silence a balm to his perpetually buzzing mind. Each day followed a blissful rhythm. Dawn coffee watching the sunrise paint the peaks pink, a hearty breakfast, then hours spent exploring the meticulously groomed runs and the exhilarating, slightly wilder glades Frostpine offered. He skied alone, relishing the freedom, the communion with the mountain and his own thoughts. Evenings were for thawing out by the fire, a good book, and the deep, uncomplicated sleep only mountain air and physical exhaustion could bring. Today was a glade day. After warming up on Maple Run, he'd headed for Whisper Pines, a network of trails winding through dense, snow-laden evergreen forests. The snow here was deeper, less tracked, whispering promises of perfect turns beneath the cathedral-like canopy. Sunlight dappled through the branches, casting long, dancing shadows. Ben felt alive, perfectly attuned to the rhythm of his skis, the flex of his boots, the bite of the cold air. He chased the untouched powder pockets, the thrill of navigating the trees a constant, exhilarating challenge. He spotted a particularly enticing swath of unblemished snow veering slightly off the main trail, leading down a gentle, unseen slope between two towering pines. Just a quick detour, he thought, the siren song of fresh powder irresistible. He shifted his weight, angling his skis towards the gap. The snow was deeper than it looked, swallowing his skis past the bindings. It was exhilarating at first, pure, floating sensation. Then, his left ski tip caught on something unseen beneath the deceptive surface, a buried root, a rock, impossible to tell. Time distorted. One moment he was carving blissfully, the next he was pitching violently forward. Instinctively, he tried to twist, to fall safely, but the deep snow and the hidden obstacle conspired against him. His body slammed down hard, the impact jarring his teeth, and he felt an immediate, sickening lurch as his momentum carried him over the edge of a hidden depression. He tumbled, a chaotic whirl of white sky, green branches, and blinding snow. The world compressed into violent sensation, the cold shock of snow packing into his collar and sleeves, the jarring thuds against his body, the terrifying lack of control. The fall wasn't long, maybe 10 feet, but it ended with brutal finality. He came to rest sprawled on his back, half buried in deep snow at the bottom of a narrow, steep-sided gully. He gasped, the wind knocked out of him, stars exploding behind his eyelids. Panic flared, hot and sharp, but he forced himself to lie still, assessing. First realization, silence. A profound, muffled silence. The cheerful sounds of distant skiers, the whisper of wind in the pines, all gone. He was in a deep, natural ditch, walls rising steeply on 3 sides, thickly overhung with snow-laden branches that blocked most of the light and sound. The opening he'd tumbled through was partially obscured by the snow he'd dislodged. Second realization, pain. Not just the general ache of a fall, but a specific, excruciating agony radiating from his left leg. He tried to move it. A white-hot lance of pain shot from his shin up through his entire body, forcing a strangled cry from his lips. He squeezed his eyes shut, breathing in ragged gasps, fighting the wave of nausea that washed over him. Okay. Okay. Don't panic. Assess his survival training, a long-ago course he'd taken on a whim, flickered weakly in his mind. He slowly raised his head, ignoring the pounding headache. His skis had popped off during the fall. One lay a few feet away, half buried. The other was nowhere in sight. His poles were scattered nearby. Gritting his teeth against the pain, he carefully pushed himself up onto his elbows. Looking down at his legs was a mistake. His left ski pants were torn near the shin. Beneath the rip, the fabric was already darkening with blood. Worse, the shape of his leg was wrong. Just below the knee, it bent at an unnatural, horrifying angle. A compound fracture. Bone had pierced the skin. The sight sent another wave of dizziness crashing over him. "Jesus," he whispered, the sound swallowed by the snow. Shock started to creep in, cold tendrils spreading from his core despite the layers of thermal clothing and insulated jacket. He recognized the signs, trembling, cold sweat breaking out on his forehead despite the freezing air, a strange detachment settling over him. Fight it. Shock kills faster than the cold. Sometimes, he forced himself into action. First, he needed to stop the bleeding and stabilize the leg. Moving it was unthinkable, but he had to try. Every shift sent fresh waves of agony, making his vision swim. He managed to drag his backpack off, wincing with every movement. Inside, thankfully, was a rudimentary first aid kit, gauze pads, bandages, antiseptic wipes, and, crucially, a triangular bandage and some safety pins. Working with clumsy, trembling fingers, he pulled up his torn pant leg. The sight of the wound, the stark white of bone against torn flesh and dark blood, nearly made him vomit. He turned his head, breathing heavily through his nose, then forced himself back. He poured antiseptic over the gauze pads, whimpering as the cold liquid hit the exposed tissue, and pressed them firmly over the wound. Using the triangular bandage, he fashioned a clumsy pressure bandage, securing it tightly with safety pins. It hurt terribly, but the immediate flow of blood seemed to lessen. Next, immobilization. He needed a splint. His eyes scanned the gully. Branches, too thick and frozen to break without tools. His ski poles. They were lightweight but rigid. He managed to crawl, dragging his shattered leg, whimpering with every inch, to retrieve one pole. The other was out of reach near the top of the gully wall. Using his ski glove as a crude pad over the bandaged wound, he carefully slid the pole along the inside of his leg. He tore strips from his spare thermal shirt in his backpack and, with agonizing slowness and teeth gritted so hard his jaw ached, he tied the pole to his leg, securing it above and below the break. It was crude, painful, and probably inadequate, but it stopped the limb from flopping freely. Exhausted, drenched in cold sweat, he slumped back against the snow wall. The immediate tasks were done, but the enormity of his situation pressed down on him like the snow-heavy branches above. He was alone. Deep in a hidden ditch, invisible from any trail. No one knew his exact route. He hadn't checked in with anyone at the resort that morning. His phone, he fumbled in his jacket pocket, showed no signal. Not even a flicker. The steep walls and overhanging snow acted like a natural Faraday cage. He tried shouting, a raw, desperate cry for help. The sound hit the snow walls and died instantly, absorbed without an echo. He tried again, louder, until his throat was raw. Nothing. Only the oppressive silence. He checked his watch. 11:47 a.m. He'd fallen around 11:30. Ski Patrol did regular sweeps at the end of the day, but that was hours away, and they focused on the marked trails. Whisper Pines was popular, but this gully was well off the beaten path. Would anyone even think to look here? Cold was the next enemy. Already, the sweat from his exertion was chilling rapidly against his skin. Hypothermia wouldn't wait. He needed insulation. He emptied his backpack, spare thermal top, a fleece neck gaiter, a thin emergency foil blanket he'd packed more out of habit than expectation, a half-eaten energy bar, and a small thermos of lukewarm tea. He put the spare thermal top on over his existing layers. He wrapped the foil blanket around his shoulders, then pulled his jacket tightly over it. He pulled the neck gaiter up over his nose and ears. He forced himself to eat half the energy bar and sip some tea, knowing he needed calories to generate heat, though his stomach churned in protest. He tried to think logically. Conserve energy. Stay awake. Signal, he had a whistle attached to his jacket zipper. He blew it, 3 sharp blasts, the universal distress signal. He paused, listening intently. Nothing. He repeated it every 15 minutes, the shrill sound bouncing uselessly off the snow walls. He tried using his ski as a reflector, angling it towards the patch of sky visible through the gap he'd fallen through, hoping to catch the sun. But the light was diffuse under the thick canopy, and the angle was poor. It felt futile. Hours crawled by. The patch of sky above dimmed as afternoon waned. The temperature plummeted. Ben shivered violently, uncontrollably. The pain in his leg was a constant, throbbing background noise, punctuated by sharp stabs if he moved even slightly. He drifted in and out of a haze, fatigue and shock pulling him towards unconsciousness. He fought it, remembering the danger of hypothermia-induced sleep. Memories flickered. His sister, Sarah, teasing him about his hermit trip, his warm apartment back in the city, the cheerful bustle of the resort cafeteria. The contrast with his current reality, trapped, broken, freezing in a silent white tomb, was crushing. He thought about giving up, letting the cold numbness wash over him. It would be easier. No, he rasped aloud, his voice hoarse and strange in the stillness. Sarah would kill me if I died being this stupid. The thought of her face, worried then furious, sparked a stubborn ember of defiance. He had to get out. He couldn't just vanish into the mountain. He focused on small actions. He ate the other half of the energy bar. He sipped more tea, now stone cold. He blew the whistle rhythmically. He scraped snow from the walls with his good hand and packed it into a bottle to melt slowly inside his jacket, a slow, inefficient way to get water, but essential. Dehydration would accelerate everything. As true dusk settled, turning his snowy prison a deep, cold blue, despair threatened to overwhelm him. Ski Patrol sweep would be happening now, but they'd be on the trails. His chalet was set for automated lights at 6 p.m., but no one would check on him personally until maybe tomorrow if he missed his usual evening appearance at the small rental shop to chat with Dave, the owner. Even then, they might just think he'd gone to the main lodge. It could be days before anyone realized he was missing. The cold was deepening, seeping into his bones despite the layers and the foil blanket. His shivering became less violent, a dangerous sign. His mind felt sluggish. He started talking to himself, narrating his actions, reciting poems he half remembered, anything to stay conscious and engaged. He imagined conversations with Sarah, with his colleagues, explaining his predicament with absurd bravado. It helped, a little. The night was interminable. The darkness in the gully was absolute, a suffocating blackness. Sounds magnified, the creak of a tree branch laden with snow, the soft whump of snow sliding off a bough somewhere above, the frantic beat of his own heart. He dozed fitfully, jerking awake each time from nightmares of suffocation or the terrifying sensation of falling. The pain was a constant companion, gnawing and insistent. He checked his watch obsessively, the glowing digits his only tether to the outside world. 1:18 a.m. 3:47 a.m. 5:02 a.m. Dawn came with agonizing slowness. A faint, gray light slowly seeped into the gully, revealing the same confining walls, the same deep snow. Ben felt hollowed out, his body a map of pain and exhaustion. His lips were cracked, his throat parched. He'd finished the melted snow. He scooped more, packing it into the bottle, his fingers numb and clumsy. He knew he couldn't last another night. His body heat was leaching away. The makeshift splint felt like it was digging into his flesh. The wound beneath the bandage throbbed ominously. He needed a better signal. Fire. But how? He had no lighter, no matches. He rummaged desperately through his backpack again, hoping for a forgotten spark. Nothing. His eyes fell on his ski binding. It was metal. And he had a small multi-tool on his keychain, a tiny, flimsy thing, but it had a file. Flint and steel? Could he create a spark? It was a desperate, almost laughable plan. He pulled off one glove, his fingers instantly screaming in the cold. He scraped the file of the multi-tool vigorously against the metal heel piece of his ski binding. Nothing. Again. And again. His fingers grew stiff, useless. He switched hands. Scrape. 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 A tiny, almost invisible spark flickered and died. Hope, fragile and fierce, surged. He scraped harder, faster, aiming the sparks towards a small pile of dry pine needles he'd painstakingly gathered from the lower branches of a nearby tree, each reach in agony. One spark landed. A tiny wisp of smoke curled up. Ben held his breath, tears freezing on his cheeks. He gently, so gently, blew on it. The smoke thickened. A minuscule orange ember glowed. He fed it the tiniest, driest twigs he could find, his numb fingers trembling. The ember grew. A tiny flame, no bigger than his thumbnail, flickered to life. Tears of pure relief streamed down his face. He nurtured the flame with monastic care, adding slightly larger twigs, then small, dry branches he could break with his hands. Soon, a small, precious fire crackled in the snow at the bottom of the ditch. Heat, blessed radiant heat, washed over his face and hands. The psychological boost was immense. He piled on more wood, building it carefully, ensuring it generated thick, dark smoke. He angled green branches onto it, creating plumes that might, just might, be visible above the gully's rim. He kept the fire going, feeding it constantly, sacrificing part of his ski pole when the readily available small wood ran low. The smoke rose in a steady column, twisting through the gap above. He blew his whistle continuously between tending the fire. His voice was gone, reduced to a painful rasp, but he forced air through the whistle. *3 blasts. Pause. 3 blasts, *. He lost track of time again, consumed by the rhythm of feeding the fire, blowing the whistle, and fighting the encroaching lethargy. The pain was a distant throb now, overshadowed by the bone-deep cold that was slowly returning as his core reserves depleted, despite the fire's warmth on his front. His vision blurred at the edges. Then, faintly, through the haze of exhaustion and cold, he heard it. Not an echo of his whistle. A different sound. A high-pitched whine, growing louder. Snowmobiles. Hope exploded in his chest, a physical force. He blew the whistle with all his remaining strength, a frantic, sustained blast. He grabbed a green branch and thrust it into the fire, creating a huge billow of smoke. Help! Here! Down here, he screamed, his voice a raw, tearing sound of the snowmobile sounds grew louder, closer, then stopped nearby. He heard voices, muffled but distinct. Smoke! Over here! Looks fresh. Hello? Anyone there? Down here! Ben shrieked, waving the smoking branch frantically. In the ditch! Help! Boots crunched on snow above. Two faces, goggled and helmeted, peered over the edge of the gully, ski patrol jackets emblazoned with the Frostpine logo. Whoa! Easy, mate. Easy, one yelled, his voice sharp with concern. We see you. Hang on. Ben slumped back against the snow, the branch dropping from his nerveless fingers. The fire crackled beside him. He couldn't speak anymore. Tears, hot this time, streamed down his frozen face as he watched the patrolman officially anchor a rope and begin rappelling down the steep wall towards him. The others spoke urgently into a radio. The rescuer reached the bottom, his movements quick and sure. Ben Harper? We've been looking for you. Dave reported you missed your usual chat last night and your chalet lights were on all night. We started the sweep at first light. Saw your smoke. His eyes scanned Ben, taking in the makeshift splint, the bloodied bandage, the pallor of his skin. Okay, son. You're in rough shape, but we've got you now. Deep breaths. We're getting you out. The next hours were a blur of controlled chaos and blessed relief. The patrolman stabilized Ben's neck, assessed his leg without moving it much. Yep, that's a nasty break, but you did good with the splint, and wrapped him in an insulated rescue blanket. A second patrolman rappelled down with a rigid stretcher. Working with practiced efficiency, they carefully immobilized Ben, securing him to the stretcher. The pain flared excruciatingly as they lifted him, but Ben barely registered it through the haze of exhaustion and overwhelming relief. Hauling him up the steep gully wall was a grueling effort for the patrolman, using ropes and pulleys. Ben kept his eyes squeezed shut, focusing on the sounds of their grunts of effort, the scrape of the stretcher against snow, the reassuring crackle of the radio reporting their progress. Then, he was out. Out of the suffocating ditch and into the vast, bright expanse of the mountainside. The morning sun, though weak, felt like a benediction on his face. The clean, cold air tasted sweeter than anything he'd ever known. He was loaded onto a waiting snowmobile stretcher sled. The ride back to the resort's medical clinic was bumpy but swift. There were flashes of the main lodge, concerned faces, the sterile brightness of the clinic. Gentle hands cut away his clothes. Warm blankets replaced the foil. And 4-needle pricked his arm, sending blessed warmth and fluids flooding his system. Pain medication flowed, dulling the sharp edges of agony to a manageable throb. A doctor examined his leg, murmuring about surgery, pins, recovery time. Ben didn't care. He was safe. He was warm. Later, clean and drowsy in a proper hospital bed, his leg elevated and encased in plaster, Ben stared out the window at the very mountains that had nearly claimed him. They still looked majestic, beautiful even, but their indifference was starkly clear. The cozy solitude of his chalet felt like a lifetime ago. A nurse bustled in. "Feeling a bit more human, Mr. Harper? You had us worried." That was quite the adventure. Ben managed a weak smile. Adventure is one word for it. His voice was still rough. "Your sister is on the phone," the nurse said, holding out a handset. "She's been frantic. Line's a bit crackly, but..." Ben took the phone. "Sarah?" "Ben." "Oh my God, Ben. Are you okay?" They said broken leg, exposure, what happened? Her voice was thick with tears and relief. Ben took a shuddering breath, looking at the plaster cast, feeling the deep ache in his bones, remembering the suffocating silence of the ditch and the fragile, life-giving flame. I went skiing, Sal," he said, his voice catching. "Took a wrong turn. Got a bit lost." He paused, the enormity of it hitting him. "But I'm here. I'm okay. Thanks to some smoke and some very brave guys on snowmobiles." He listened to her relieved sobs, the sound washing over him, warmer than any mountain sun. The silence of the mountain had been profound, terrifying. But the sound of his sister's voice, the hum of the hospital, even the distant beep of monitors, these were the sounds of survival. They were the sounds of coming home. He closed his eyes, not to shut out the world, but to finally, safely, rest.